Or is it just me, right? So if you're new here and you don't know who I am Fusion Phil over here at jitcadcam. For those of you watching this video at a later date and time, you're probably picking up in the middle of nowhere wondering what's happened. We had a bunch of technical difficulties and I'm gonna crop that off. But as today's video does say, we're gonna go through cheat codes inside of Fusion 360. Now, there's not really an unlock everything cheat code inside of Fusion. These are just things that I have learned over the years with instructing as well as using Fusion on a daily application to what is actually going to make your workflows better. Everything from modeling to toolpaths. Now we are going to kick this off for modeling for you out there, and then we are going to transition over into the cam portion of things. But let's go ahead and dive in. Now these secrets and these tips and these cheat codes are going to be good for all of you, right? So as most of you may know, ever taken a training with me or have ever actually been in one of my classes, what I am going to do is I'm going to kick this off with my number one rule. It doesn't matter if you're an advanced user or if you're new to Fusion, but the concept of a top to bottom, left to right. Now I say top to bottom. I know all of you were taught how to read a book. You go left to right, top to bottom, but the top to bottom, left to right means you're going to want to read through your pages before you turn those pages, right? So for an example here, and this is going to lead me into another little scenario where I'm going to create a sketch, and then you're going to notice that I'm in a different workspace. But if I wanted to proof of concept something, and I say proof of concept because a lot of people miss out on the idea that they will spend a ton of time right now trying to make the perfect sketch. And in the real world, nobody really sees your sketch, right? So as you guys are going to see here is if I wanted to go ahead and define and draw some simple part, just like that, I was able to prove that I could do it. I can now go through and throw on some fillets here. So again, a really good cheat code that you're going to see inside of Fusion is I am going to pivot from the idea of this. Give me a sec here. I'm going to throw a few more features on this, but is utilizing your timeline to your advantage. So as you guys are seeing me do here in a couple of ways, I'm putting a lot of things down on my timeline. And now the timeline is key to that first thing, right? Proof of concept. Let's go ahead and get a design on paper because we could always go back and modify and do things like creating dimensions. Again, if you guys are wondering, top to bottom workflow, they even include in the sketch environment to put your dimensions as the very last thing to kind of do, right? Now, this is an argumentative thing for a lot of you out there. As most of you know or take my class, when we talk about timelines, we talk about features. When we talk about features, it's better to pattern features, not to pattern sketches. But again, from creating your basic profiles and then dimensioning things, later you can modify. Again, this is just, I would never actually do fillets, chamfers, and any of you out there already know, never trim things that you're working with because it can break your constraints, right? But that is more or less your workflow as you're working through the design side of things is I could go through, add my dimensions. Now, being a little more cautious on my timeline for you out there is, as you notice down below, is I have two different sets of fillets. I see this quite a bit at the end of the day where you shouldn't have multiple features. Now, you will need to separate features when I show you again a pattern real quick. But as you can see, I could delete that out of my timeline. And if I want additional fillets or additional chamfers, I can hit that plus sign and go ahead and plug those in. So again, you could add as many or as few as you want, but now you're grouping them in a base of features. So real quick here, and now to really understand why it's important to group certain things and why it's not, is if I was to throw a circle up here at the top on my part, and then I'm going to extrude. And now what you guys are starting to see me do is I'm using hotkeys. Again, another cheat code to another cheat code for Fusion is your hotkeys. And if you guys didn't catch that, let me back that up and do that one more time. And this is, again, I'm going to pivot here a little bit, but if you noticed, I was inside the sketch area, right? I think a lot of people overlook, like, just, again, proof of concept. We can do a lot of stuff with things if we can just get what we want as a final product, right? It doesn't need to be precise. I'm going to pivot for you guys at some point. We're going to talk about the mills and lathes out there and why this is important. But as you can see, I can finish out my sketch, right? So again, I can finish this sketch out early and I can pivot over to solids. Now, for you out there using hotkeys, I can also just hit the hotkey for extrude. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in the sketch palette, because if I hit E on my keyboard, the automation inside of Fusion for a quick, clean workflow has automatically jumped to the extrude feature. Now, another neat trick about this is if you use the S key on your keyboard, and that's S as in Sierra, you can pull up your own custom design shortcut menu. For example here, I can do things like pin my fillets and chamfers, right? So again, if I hit S and I want to pick a chamfer, now in this case, I'm going to go ahead and turn that sketch off. Again, I'm going to add a chamfer to this part. Maybe I hit F for fillet, or I hit S and then go to my fillet tool. As you guys are seeing me do is I am modifying one item. So again, quick workflows inside of Fusion, and this is just me. Maybe you guys want to tell me in chat that I'm wrong, but I could also do things with pattern. And this is where we pick up a ton of speed when it comes to your modeling. So what you're going to see me do now is I am going to model those three features around a center axis. And just like that, we have full control over how many we want. Again, manipulate, modify, proof of concept. You could do it with the intent. You could always go back in your timeline, maybe give this a bolt hole pattern, set your dimensions from center. What size is it, right? As you guys are seeing me do this a little quick, because I know most of you out there only get a 30-minute lunch break and want to catch this programming. But you notice, again, I can proof of concept, go back, modify, change, and manipulate what I have. So let me run through my list here. I did write these down to make sure that we're getting all of them as quick as I can. But as you're seeing is, once with that information is the ability to use the S key is a huge cheat code inside of Fusion. This is customizable, and you're going to see me reuse this not only in the sketch area, the extrude area, but if you're utilizing a high-end mouse, now I don't know how well you guys can see this. Maybe I'll go back and put it in front of my face. I love the Logitech mouse, but I have additional buttons on the side of my mouse, and that is where I can map on my side one of those to be an S key. How you do that, that's up to you and your mouse manufacturer. I know if you're also doing things like using a CAD mouse, it is extremely handy, but good old-fashioned mapping the S key, whether it be on the mouse. Again, if you do it on the mouse, you can quickly grab things without typing on your keyboard, but that is going to help you a ton. Again, let's go back to rule number one, top to bottom, left to right. Again, just proof of concepting, hitting finish early or hitting that OK button early, and then utilizing that S key. So let's pivot now. We're going to go ahead and jump over to a lathe part right off the rip. And what I'm going to do is to make this transition make sense is if I hit the S key in the manufacturer area, you're going to notice I now have manufacturing shortcuts. So for example, one of my items that I've pinned is turning face. Now, this is probably one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to utilizing toolpaths inside of Fusion, is a lot of people try to do too much. Now, again, this is where my rule number two for most of you out there, hitting the OK button inside of Fusion will dramatically improve your chances of getting the right thing, right? So as you guys are going to see here is I went ahead and hit S. We're going to grab an 80-degree roughing tool. And I would honestly say when it comes to the tickets I get on my end, 9 times out of 10 is somebody has changed too much. But as you can see, getting those blue lines on your part is where you can make all additional actual choices. Now, where this is going to get you at the end of the day is if I go in and I do turning profile rough, which is going to lead me into another one of my favorite things for cheat code wise, is how many people are still utilizing an older method to kind of remedy their problems. And that problem is we're getting water falling on our part. And then if I wanted to go further than the back of my part, you guys can see this in real time. Now in the geometry menu, I have a lot of options to extend past the back, but starting with the idea that if I wanted to go further than my part, instead of using offsets, using tangential extensions, right? So if I go in and I set my tangential extension to point 2, it's not grooving, right? So that's a key element to remember at the end of the day is if I just want to continue with the last profile used, it will extend that out as needed based on that information. Now, this is a two-way connection because you could also do the same thing at the beginning of the part, right? So again, I'm going to tangential the extension on the front by 0.1 and the rear by 0.1. Now, the number is up to you guys as to what you use, but when it comes to remedy things like grooving, undercutting, things of that nature, a big no-no in the industry now is everybody wants to jump to the passes tab. And this is where I always see people get too deep into a toolpath, right? You want to simply say, don't allow grooving. And I know it's a lazy way to do it, guys, and it works. Just like that, we're no longer dipping in. But where the problem actually is going to come from is in the event I was using a left-handed tool or I was actually going back to front. What you're going to notice now is because we don't allow grooving, we do not allow the actual x-axis to feed back in on this part. So again, this cheat code here isn't the fact that jumping all the way to an easy remedy for most toolpaths. It's the fact that if we were allowing radial grooving, you would notice we get back into our part. But I really want to make the point clear that if we go back to our second tab where we're defining geometry, is we have things like rest machining, or you have things like groove suppression. Again, that left to right, top to bottom. Let's get down the list before you go jumping too far into the book, right? You skip a chapter in your book and then you're like, what is going on? So again, what you're going to see me do here is I can pull groove suppression. Now I need to go wall to wall. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And just like that, you guys can now see that due to groove suppression, I am clearly going over that area, but I'm back dragging that tool and I'm still able to work in that front area, right? So again, this is one of my very, very big things that I love to teach and I love to point out to people that when you're rocking through these toolpaths is 9 times out of 10, your problems are caused because you failed to more or less do something in the geometry or heights tab before you got to modifying things in the passes tab. Now, what does that look like if we actually transition over to a milling part, right? So as you guys can see here is here's my 2D milling part. Well, what could happen is if I was going to do this part, now some of you out there are going to say I would never do that with 2D. That's okay, guys. But if I go through and I start off by maybe 2D adaptive clearing this part, I go ahead and hit OK. I'm going to grab my tool here. And just like that, we should be roughing out that area on our part. Now, I have my stock turned on, but I'm going to get it kicked back on. Again, if you guys notice, the way I practice and the way I teach is the same way I use the actual software is I got blue lines. Again, we can manipulate that from there, aligning the colors. Blue lines, I need more blue lines. I go to the blue line tab. We kick on multiple depths. What I'm really concerned about showing you at the end of the day is when we start to talk about lower areas, right? So in the event I was going to do adaptive clearing again, and I wanted to machine out this area, what you're going to notice is we may be stopping at that exact end or that exact chain boundary. Now, again, this is the equivalent to the lathe side of jumping too far in and trying to do certain things. As you guys can see, there is no tangential extension here in adaptive roughing. But what I want to do is we're going to go ahead and pivot real quick to 2D adaptive or 2D contour, because you do still have tangential extensions, right? Now, this is going to extend everything. So if I actually was to add more geometry here, take, for example, these couple of lines, and let's grab this one all the way at the end. And I was to say, you know what? I want to extend all of these 1/4 of an inch. What you're going to notice is each and every one of those segments has been extended, where some of you may be looking at this now going, you know what? That might work for a couple of scenarios, but I need different settings for different locations, right? So again, getting too deep in the toolpath long before actually sitting here and recognizing things like, hey, from a geometry contour selection, I need to utilize that this one particular, I might actually want to extend out only 0.05, right? And then from there, I might go to my next chain. Now this one, we're going to extend 1 inch and so forth and so on. Again, you can extend one end, you can extend both ends symmetrical. You can even shorten things. And this is super neat to me at the end of the day is, again, we could go to that third chain. I would like to start 1 inch out, but I would like to finish a 1/2 inch short. Again, as you're going to see here is that toolpath is now trimmed one contour chain that we have basically grouped all these together. Again, we grouped them together, if you can remember, kind of like we did doing our chamfers and fillets here on our part, right? So again, we can work through these more and more, diving deeper and deeper in, but this tends to lead me into a few more things that I would love to cover and show you guys. I got to look at my lovely list here to make sure I'm getting everything I want. Now, this next one is probably one of my favorite things, regardless of your workspaces, right? And that is if you have no idea what you're doing, we got rule number 2, which is hit the OK button, right? Now, it gets better than that because once you do something, and I'm just going to pull up, again, let's just grab a toolpath I've already created. But if you're really going through and starting to figure out and dive deeper into these toolpaths, is the ability to just stop and pause, right? So if I stop and pause right now, this is going to give me an explanation of what it wants to be modified, right? If I go back to my heights tab, I go ahead and highlight select pockets. Again, you're going to notice that it's given me multiple examples on what to do and how to do it. Now that gets better because if I was to go back in to my modeling environment, I do get the same exact outcome. And I want to show this to you guys because a lot of people don't realize that you can do this. But let's say, for example, actually, I'm going to back this up one because we're going to add a second hole pattern. And I'm going to do that based off the fact I'm going to place a point. Now, this is where if I wanted to dimension said point based on a certain angle, again, if I pause with my dimensioning tool, it's asking me for an object to dimension. So I click, pause again. I can click my second point. And as you can see, I can either select the location for dimension, and this is one of those hidden things, or I could add additional items to this. As you can see, I just did a 3-point kind of move to create a angular dimension. So again, paying attention to what you're trying to do, how you're trying to do that in the software will make quite a big difference. Again, I pause, select face, plane, or point. Again, a very simple time of pausing, taking a look at what you're going for will make all the difference at the end of the day. But let's go ahead and jump back a little bit more as you guys are going to see here. So at this point, I'm going to throw another toolpath at this. Now, we're going to go ahead and swap out to our big 2-inch cutter, maybe, if it's in here. And as you guys can see, that would be a facing toolpath, right? So again, this is a cheat code I think a lot of people always overlook is I'm a big fan of a tool only goes so deep and so fast in a part, right? So precautionary, I would always turn on multiple depths for my facing tool, which that is allowing you to be able to go in and save as user default your settings and to have that on by default, right? Now, why that is important is because I can turn something into a template. So again, as if I wanted to store this as a template, as you guys can see, this is just going to be called face. We're going to go ahead and throw this in my library somewhere. Let's throw it in my local library so I can get rid of it later. But when we start jumping from part to part to part, again, a tool only goes so deep and so fast, I can grab that facing operation and auto-generate those toolpaths. Again, this works both on mill as well as lathe. I don't think I have any lathe ones in here, but let's go ahead and see. 2-axis lathe. So just like that, I've posted in 3 toolpaths that were never really designed for this part. But as you're going to see is they've automatically recognized all the features. Now, again, I may need to do a little tweaking, may need to do a little adjusting, but it's very easy to go in and quickly grab 1, 2, multiple toolpaths and apply them to a part. Now, a few other cheat codes that a couple people miss out on is in the event that you wanted to go through and bulk edit things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a compare and edit. And now as you're going to see is I have access to everything and anything across all the toolpaths I've selected. Now, where this actually gets really nice is because you can go down and you could filter by different only, and then filter out those results and make those changes, right? So again, there's a lot of stuff in this menu that people miss out on. One of my favorite ones is actually going to preset, because again, if you're quickly grabbing tool or your templates, you need a way to change your speeds and feeds. So as you guys can see is that's my feeds and speeds for those toolpaths. I can quickly come through. Again, in this case, they're all defaults, but if I had my different speeds and feeds, had my step overs associated, my step downs associated to my tool, it would quickly populate this all in real time. So as you guys are seeing, we could go ahead and regenerate our toolpaths. I do see a question from Pablo over there. I'm going to go ahead and pivot. Give me one sec here. I want to check my list before I start jumping on some questions. So I do have one more, but Pablo, are the jaws and the chuck driven by joints? Pablo, they on that particular model are not. I do have content on how to do that on my YouTube channel, which feel free to go watch those videos and let me know how they do. I also have a super lazy way that I do 3-jaw chucks. It's a great way to do it, much easier in my opinion. But the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you probably the word, how can I word this? Probably the best thing I can give you, being somebody coming from other softwares with a lot of mouse clicks, and that is simply thinking about your mouse clicks, right? Is in the world of whether or not you're going to use templates, is it faster for me to go grab that toolpath and simply turn on, in this case, multiple depths and hit OK? Or is it something that it is faster to do something as in grab my template and go? Now, you're going to find yourself when you first start using things like template that it is going to take, time to perfect those into that 80% category, right? But this is not to say that it's not the same way for you guys out there in the design workspace, right? So as some of you guys saw me draw this bushing, if I started a brand new file, to which I see this a lot, is people try to do the line tool. And now, again, we're counting in mouse clicks, right? So I'm pulling this line out. Now you'll notice that, you know what? I could never get that perpendicular. Now I need to do something like horizontal vertical or a perpendicular constraint. And now it's there in that case. That was a lot of effort going into the software. Now, if I would do the same thing doing 2 rectangles, I still achieved an L profile. And I did that L profile. If you guys wanted to, I could have plugged those dimensions in right there on the front side, making my life much easier. So again, thinking about those mouse clicks, how many times am I clicking my mouse? The more your mouse clicks self-conscious, the faster your workflows will get, because you will find ways to either set defaults, generate templates, or do the one thing that I did just forget. Let me check my list because I didn't put it on here. My final tip for you cam guys out there, and this is probably one of my favorite things, is the ability to go in, right click, and derive. So again, big cheat code here, guys, that you could go through and you could derive out and actually generate a toolpath off another toolpath is going to be extremely beneficial for you. Still needing to adapt to speeds and feeds and things like that. But as you guys can see, this is a big list of cheat codes. I'm going to let you guys back to it. How long have we been going? Under 30 minutes. You guys can still get back to work. But before you get back to work, if you guys like this content, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, you guys can give more support, as some of you have our support packages. You could buy me a beer. You could buy me a steak. Am I on the right side? Over here. There we go. Buy me a beer. You could buy me a steak if you got something new out of this information. You can use our support email address down below to go ahead and reach out if you have any other questions outside of that. Now, I look forward to seeing you also all on Friday for our next Free Support Friday. Come prepared with models and different things that you want to see. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And you guys all know myself, Fusion Phil over here at jitcadcam. With that, go ahead, have a great rest of your day, and hopefully you got to drink a beer while you watch this, or at least a nice coffee. Thanks, guys.